Imagine for a moment that the conflict between Israel and Iran isn't just about power. It's not just another headline. What if all of this, the threats, the strikes, the rising tensions, is actually an echo of a much older war? A war that began before there were borders, before there were even nations, way back, when eternal promises were made and ancient curses were cast. You can feel it in the air. Something different is unfolding. This isn't just politics. This isn't just strategy. There's something spiritual pulsing behind the news, something the Bible warned us about centuries ago, because no matter how modern it all seems, what we're witnessing today is just another chapter in a story that began with two brothers who didn't fight over land, but over a blessing. Israel and Iran are not just geopolitical rivals. They are descendants of a promise and of a division. So, are we merely witnessing another Middle East conflict? Or were the prophets right, and the prophetic clock is ticking louder than ever before? You can't truly understand the tension between Iran and Israel without going all the way back to the beginning, when God called a man named Abraham and promised him a land, a lineage, and an eternal covenant. Sounds simple, right? But behind those words lies the seed of one of the greatest spiritual conflicts in history. It's like an unresolved inheritance battle between brothers. While Isaac carries the line of promise, Ishmael carries the pain of rejection, and throughout the centuries, that pain echoes through every new chapter in Middle Eastern history. Imagine two families fighting over the same house for generations. It doesn't matter who holds the deed. Each side believes with all their heart that they belong there. That's what it's like between Israel and the peoples linked to Ishmael, including those represented today by Iran. What many see as a territorial war is, in truth, a battle for identity. It's a silent clash over who is the rightful heir to what the Bible calls the promise, something that isn't won by armies, but by divine purpose. And this tension is more alive than ever. When you look at the alliances, the attacks, the fiery speeches, you begin to see that it all revolves around a spiritual right that no one is willing to give up. And then comes the question few dare to ask out loud: is that promise still being contested? If so, maybe the root of this conflict goes far deeper than any peace agreement could ever fix. In recent years, criticism of the state of Israel has become increasingly common, some of it fair, but much of it extremely filled with hatred. What many people don't realize is that often this discourse goes beyond politics and enters a much darker territory: disguised anti-Semitism. The Bible had already warned about this kind of hostility, and in places like Psalm 83 and Zechariah 12, we see that this opposition to the Jewish people is nothing new. It is spiritual, deep, and has invisible roots that most ignore. It's like when someone says, "I don't have a problem with religion, just with religious people." That sentence may seem harmless, but often hides deep-seated rejection. Criticizing Israel's political decisions is one thing. In fact, every government should be analyzed with critical thinking. But turning that into rejection of the Jewish people as a whole, that's a different story. It would be like hating all children just because you disagreed with the school principal. And when this kind of confusion spreads, the spirit of war finds more room to act. Iran, for example, has used this type of rhetoric as fuel for its narratives, not just as a military strategy, but as a tool for ideological warfare. When leaders talk about wiping Israel off the map, they're not just talking about a country. They are attacking the prophetic thread that connects Israel to the Bible, to history, and to God's very plan. And if that plan is the target of such hatred, what might it be carrying that is so important? In times of visible war, there is an invisible war happening with even greater intensity. And interestingly, the true protagonists of this battle don't appear in the headlines. They are ordinary people who kneel in silence behind the scenes of the world, like Daniel, like Esther, like Mary. They had no armies, but they had faith, courage, and discernment. The story of the Bible shows that many times it is these intercessors who change the course of events without ever touching a sword. It's like a movie set. What happens behind the scenes determines the impact of the main scene. That's how it works in the spiritual world too. While the world debates Iran and Israel, the Bible shows us that prayer has real power, just as real as any bomb dropped. Every intercessor is like a watchman at dawn, holding together the walls of a spiritual fortress that must not fall. And if you think your prayer doesn't change anything, remember, Daniel prayed alone and stirred the kingdom of Persia. Want to be part of this story? Then start where you are. Create a prayer routine. Set aside 10 minutes a day to intercede for Israel, for Iran, for world leaders. Do it with purpose, with an open Bible, with discernment, and realize this, at this very moment, while leaders make decisions behind closed doors, there is a war happening in the invisible realm, and you might be the key that changes everything. Long before missiles, sanctions, and UN meetings, the Bible was already speaking of an ancient conflict, an enmity that was born in Eden and continued through the centuries, taking on faces, flags, and languages. The serpent, the woman, the offspring, it's all there in Genesis 3 verse 15, already pointing to a war that would not just be between men, but between purposes. Iran and Israel today are the visible protagonists of a spiritual drama that began with the separation between good and evil. The conflict between Abraham's sons is just one part of this larger story. Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, each pair carries the weight of promises, rejections, alliances, and fractures. It's as if each generation inherited not only land and traditions, but also unresolved tensions, and these tensions keep manifesting in increasingly intense ways in today's discourse and decisions. That's why, when people talk about a war between Iran and Israel, it's not just about political strategy, it's about a spiritual thread that has never stopped being stretched. The Bible reveals there's something beyond the surface, and anyone who doesn't read it with spiritual eyes will only see half the story. Just like a crack in a house might signal a foundational problem, today's conflicts are symptoms of an ancient root. And understanding that root changes everything. It changes how we see, how we pray, and even how we consume the news. Because the Bible, unlike the news, already knows how this ends. The story of Esther may seem like an ancient palace tale full of royalty, but in truth, it's a prophetic mirror of something far deeper, the spiritual hatred against the Jewish people. Haman didn't just hate a people, he hated a purpose. Behind his genocidal plan was an attempt to erase a lineage, a promise, a covenant made long ago with Abraham. And this isn't some conspiracy theory, it's pure Bible. What was at stake wasn't just the lives of the Jews in Persia, but the prophetic thread leading to the birth of the Messiah. When you read this book carefully, you see that Haman wasn't just driven by pride or power. He was moved by something greater, darker, almost satanic. The same spirit that fueled him still shows up today in modern rhetoric when leaders declare that Israel should be destroyed. And make no mistake, this isn't an isolated coincidence. Iran, which occupies the ancient land of Persia, seems to be repeating the script, as if the scene from Esther is being reenacted right before our eyes. And here's the part few people realize. Just like in the past, God is still raising up Esthers today, hidden people in strategic places with the courage to take a stand. Maybe you know one, maybe you are one, because the battle may look the same, but the stage is now global, and the curtain is only just beginning to rise. The story of Esther may seem like just another ancient tale, full of kings, queens, and palace banquets. But when you look closer, you see there's something much greater there. Haman didn't hate the Jews just because he wanted to erase everything God had promised since Abraham. It was as if he were trying to destroy a plan that had been unfolding for centuries. And the worst part, that kind of hatred didn't stay in the past. It's still alive today. If you think about it, it's as if the script is repeating itself. In the book of Esther, Haman plots to destroy the Jews. Today, Iran, which is ancient Persia, repeatedly declares its intent to wipe Israel off the map. Coincidence? Doesn't seem like it. It feels more like a spiritual déjà vu. The same kind of hatred, just with new words, new clothing, new speeches. And all of this makes it clear the problem was never just political. There's something much deeper behind it all. But there's a beautiful part to this story. God used an unlikely woman, hidden within an empire, to save an entire people. And who's to say he's not doing the same thing today? Maybe there are modern-day Esthers out there, people in strategic positions, quiet for now, but ready to act when the time is right. Could it be that you are in such a place too? Some things we think were left in the past. But when we take a closer look, we realize they've only changed clothes. The same spirit that drove Haman back in ancient Persia, that blind desire to destroy the people of Israel, is still around today. It just changed names, faces, and tactics. Now it shows up in modern speeches, strange alliances, in leaders who carry an unexplainable anger deep in their hearts. And when that happens, it's as if history is hitting replay. It's no coincidence that Iran, which was once called Persia, is still one of Israel's main opponents. It almost feels like there's an invisible thread tying it all together, running through generations and across centuries. The Bible shows us that the spiritual world is not disconnected from time. What began with Abraham, passed through Esther, and arrived in Jesus is still unfolding today, just on different stages, with new battles, but the same spiritual interest behind it all. And this is where we need to open our eyes, because if history is repeating itself, it means something still hasn't been resolved. Maybe we are living through the next chapter of an ancient war, a war that didn't start with weapons, but with promises. And if that's the case, could it be that what we're seeing now is just the beginning? Cyrus was king of Persia. In other words, he ruled over what is now Iran. And here's the curious part. He wasn't part of God's people. He didn't know the promises, didn't follow the commandments, yet he was used by God to fulfill one of the greatest restorations in history, releasing the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. That's in the Bible, and it's no small detail. God took an unlikely leader from a pagan nation and used him as a key piece in his plan. Now imagine that today, a president of a nation hostile to Israel, being moved by God to support, restore, or protect the Jewish people. Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened with Cyrus. And the most striking part? His name was already prophesied in Isaiah 150 years before he was even born. That shows how God works outside human logic, using even those who don't believe to move the pieces on the prophetic chessboard. And maybe that same pattern is still in motion. Who's to say that today, even among Israel's declared enemies, God isn't raising someone up to fulfill a specific purpose? Sometimes the instrument comes from where we least expect it. And when that happens, it's a sign that something big is being prepared. Daniel was there, praying, fasting, seeking answers. And for 21 days, the heavens seemed silent. But when the angel finally appeared, he revealed something astounding. From the very first day, the answer was already on its way. But there had been resistance in the spiritual realm. A being called the Prince of Persia tried to block the angel from reaching Daniel. This isn't a metaphor, it's spiritual reality. Behind empires and governments, There are invisible forces fighting to delay God's plans. And that Prince of Persia, mentioned in Daniel 10, hasn't vanished from the map. The region is still the same. Today, it's Iran. The spiritual battle Daniel faced didn't end. It just moved to a new phase. While Israel remains the focus of the promises, Iran continues to be one of the greatest resistances. And when we see the friction between these two peoples, maybe what's behind it isn't just politics. Maybe it's a war between angels and demons taking place in the unseen. And here comes the most important detail. It was Daniel's prayer that activated all of this. It was his intercession that moved the heavens and ignited the spiritual battle. In other words, nothing is small when someone prays with faith. If Daniel alone was able to trigger a heavenly war, imagine what could happen when thousands pray together today. Maybe the most powerful battlefield is still a closed room with a locked door. In the books of Ezekiel and Jeremiah, the Bible mentions Persia as a central piece in the events of the end times. And guess who ancient Persia is? Exactly. Iran. That means that even before this country existed with that name, it was already prophesied. And when we see Iran aligning itself with forces that openly stand against Israel, it's like the pages of prophecy are being read live. What's most alarming is that Iran doesn't hide this intention. Leaders speak openly about destroying Israel, as if they're repeating a script written thousands of years ago. But this time, with modern weapons, drones, fiery speeches at the UN, and alliances that worry the whole world, this isn't a conspiracy theory, it's reality. And when the Bible and the headlines collide, it's time to pay closer attention than ever. Many people look at the Middle East as just a political problem, but those who know the scriptures understand that region is a prophetic stage. Every movement, every alliance, every threat, it all points to something greater. Iran is not just another nation caught in tension. It carries an ancient, heavy role that was revealed long before it ever made the news. And if prophecy keeps being fulfilled, what else is about to happen? While the world is distracted by social media controversies and endless debates, some people have understood what really matters: to watch and pray. And this isn't just religious talk, it's a spiritual strategy. Daniel did it. Esther too. They were alert, connected, sensitive to the time they were living in. And today, the call continues. But now, the one being called is you. The war between Iran and Israel is just the tip of the iceberg. Something much bigger is happening in the invisible. Being watchful today is more than watching the news. It's interpreting what's happening through the lens of the Bible. It's realizing that certain events are not random. They are warnings. And when we watch and pray, we participate. It's like placing our hands on the steering wheel of history, alongside God. Praying for Israel, for Iran, for wisdom in governments, all of that is far more powerful than it seems. Want to put this into practice? Take 5 minutes before going to sleep. Talk to God about what you saw that day. Pray for the nations, ask for discernment, and watch, notice the signs. Compare them with the Bible. Keep your heart sensitive, because the days are evil, but those who watch can see what no one else sees. And that's where the real impact begins. Many people look at Israel and see just a tiny country, surrounded by enemies and full of conflicts. But those who know the Bible understand that Israel is not just a nation. It is a living sign, a covenant made by God with a specific people in a specific place. Israel's existence is no coincidence. It is fulfillment. It is living prophecy walking on earth. And when someone attacks Israel, they're not just opposing a government, they're tampering with something God himself established. It's like someone trying to tear out a page from the divine plan without realizing that the page is written in indelible ink. Israel is the stage of the Bible's greatest promises, and because of that, it's also the target of the fiercest resistance. Iran, for example, doesn't just see Israel as a political rival. It sees it as a spiritual thorn. Because as long as Israel exists, the prophecy remains alive, and that deeply disturbs those on the other side of the story. And the question remains, why does God insist so much on preserving this people, despite so much opposition? The answer lies in the promise made to Abraham, a promise that involves blessing for all nations. In other words, the plan is not just about Israel, it's about the entire world. And if that's true, maybe what's behind this war is far greater than we imagine. When people think of Iran, the first image that comes to mind is war, threats, persecution. But once again, the Bible surprises us. In Jeremiah 49, God not only declares judgment upon Elam, a region now part of Iran, but also promises restoration. That's right. In the midst of all the tension, there's a promise of revival, and the most incredible part, it has already begun. Far from the spotlight, in underground churches, in the hidden corners of faith where no one sees, thousands of Iranians have been secretly converting, risking their lives to follow Jesus. They're not looking for religion. They're looking for truth. They're tired of oppression, of lies, of fear, and they're finding comfort precisely in the one who is most rejected by the surrounding system, the Jewish Messiah. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But that's exactly how God often works. Where it seems impossible, He ignites hope. And what if Iran, which today is seen as an enemy, becomes a bridge of reconciliation in the future? What if the people who now live in the shadows are used to bring light to the Middle East? It's a powerful thought, but prophecy has already pointed in that direction. Perhaps while the world prepares for war, God is planting seeds of revival in places no one ever imagined. While the news frames everything as politics, strategy, and diplomacy, the church needs to see beyond that. The Bible never told us to just watch the events, it tells us to interpret them. Jesus said, watch. And that watching isn't passive, it's active. It means paying attention to the signs, but also taking a stand. And the most powerful stand a Christian can take is prayer. Not mechanical, cold prayer, but conscious prayer with understanding of the prophetic time we're living in. It's time for the church to stop getting distracted by internal fights, shallow discussions, and superficialities. The world is burning in conflict, and God is looking for intercessors, people willing to pray with tears, to cry out for discernment, to intercede for Israel, for Iran, and for a global spiritual awakening. We weren't called to sit on the sidelines, watching like it's just another game on TV. We were called to get on the field and fight in the invisible realm. And that battle starts in a simple way. Setting aside time each day, opening the Bible with an open heart, standing before God and asking, Lord, what are you doing right now? And how can I be part of it? When the church wakes up and prays, the heavens will move. Because the war has already begun, but the most powerful army hasn't entered the field yet. Now tell me, after all of this, can you really keep watching the news as if it's just another political conflict between nations? Are you still going to ignore what the Bible has been revealing for millennia? Iran, Israel, promises, prophecies, all of it is unfolding before our eyes. And to ignore it is to miss the chance to understand what God is doing in our time. But the most important question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you keep it to yourself, or will you finally wake up and step into the battlefield of intercession, vigilance, and active faith? This video isn't just information, it's a calling, a warning, a summons. If this content spoke to you, leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Share it with someone who needs to wake up. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, because there's a lot more coming. We're going to keep uncovering everything that's hidden in the light of the Bible, and you won't want to miss it.